From the sands of the Libyan desert emerged one of the most controversial leaders of the 20th and early 21st century. To some, he was a revolutionary who defied Western powers. To others, he was a ruthless dictator who brought decades of oppression. This is the rise and fall of Muammar Gaddafi. Muammar Gaddafi was born in 1942 in a Bedouin tent near Sirte, Libya. His family was poor, living a nomadic lifestyle, raising sheep and goats in the harsh desert. As a child, Gaddafi grew up hearing stories about colonial rule. At the time, Libya was under Italian occupation and later became a monarchy under King Idris after independence in 1951. From a young age, Gaddafi developed strong nationalist ideas. He admired Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who spoke of Arab unity and independence from Western powers. In 1963, Gaddafi entered the Libyan Military Academy. There, he formed a secret group of young officers who dreamed of overthrowing King Idris. On September 1, 1969, while the king was abroad for medical treatment, the 27-year-old Gaddafi and his fellow officers launched a bloodless coup. The monarchy collapsed overnight, and a new era began. Gaddafi declared himself the leader of the Libyan Arab Republic. Gaddafi wasted no time consolidating power. He expelled foreign military bases, nationalized oil, and declared that Libya's wealth belonged to its people. Oil revenues surged in the 1970s, making Libya one of the richest nations in Africa. In his famous political manifesto, the Green Book, Gaddafi introduced his unique system, which he called the Third Universal Theory. He rejected both capitalism and communism, claiming his ideology was a true form of direct democracy. But in reality, power was concentrated in his hands. Political opposition was outlawed. Dissenters were imprisoned, tortured, or executed. Still, Gaddafi presented himself as a revolutionary leader, funding schools, hospitals, and infrastructure projects. For a time, many Libyans admired him. Gaddafi saw himself not just as the leader of Libya, but as a global revolutionary. He used Libya's oil wealth to fund liberation movements around the world, from Africa to Latin America. But he also supported extremist groups, earning him enemies across the West. Libya was accused of sponsoring terrorism in the 1980s, including the bombing of a Berlin nightclub in 1986 and the Pan Am Flight 103 bombing over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988, which killed 270 people. In response, the United States bombed Tripoli and Benghazi in 1986. Gaddafi survived, but his adopted daughter was killed in the attack. This deepened his hatred for Western powers, especially the United States and Britain. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Libya became increasingly isolated. Sanctions crippled its economy, and Gaddafi's image on the world stage shifted from revolutionary leader to pariah dictator. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Gaddafi attempted to rehabilitate his international image. After years of denial, Libya admitted responsibility for the Lockerbie bombing and paid billions in compensation to victims' families. In 2003, he stunned the world by announcing that Libya would abandon its weapons of mass destruction programs. Western leaders cautiously welcomed him back. For a brief period, Gaddafi shook hands with presidents, prime ministers, and business leaders. Oil companies returned. Sanctions were lifted. But at home, his regime remained authoritarian. While Libya's oil wealth made the country relatively prosperous, corruption and inequality persisted. Gaddafi's eccentric speeches, bizarre fashion, and habit of living in a tent when traveling abroad made him a constant subject of fascination and ridicule. In 2011, a wave of revolutions swept across the Arab world. From Tunisia to Egypt, long-standing dictators fell. Inspired by these uprisings, Libyans took to the streets in February, demanding political reforms and freedom. At first, the protests were peaceful, but Gaddafi responded with brutal force. His security forces opened fire on demonstrators, sparking outrage and escalating the conflict into a full-blown civil war. Rebel groups, backed by defected soldiers, began seizing cities. Gaddafi vowed to crush them, declaring he would hunt his enemies house by house, alley by alley. The world watched in horror. The United Nations authorized a no-fly zone, and NATO launched airstrikes against Gaddafi's forces. Slowly, the balance of power shifted in favor of the rebels. By August 2011, the capital, Tripoli, fell. Gaddafi fled, moving from town to town, hiding as rebel forces closed in. On October 20, 2011, in his hometown of Sirte, Gaddafi was captured and killed by rebel fighters. After 42 years in power, his rule ended violently, just as he had lived, in chaos and defiance. Today, Muammar Gaddafi remains one of the most polarizing figures of modern history. To some Africans, he was a leader who stood up to Western domination and dreamed of a united Africa. To others, he was a tyrant who silenced his people and squandered Libya's wealth. Even after his death, Libya has struggled with division, civil war, and instability, a painful reminder of the fragile state he left behind. Muammar Gaddafi's story is not just about one man's rise and fall. It is a story about power, ambition, and the price a nation pays when leadership becomes a cult of personality. His name will forever be remembered, both with admiration and with fear. This was the rise and fall of Muammar Gaddafi, a man who ruled Libya with an iron hand and whose shadow still looms over the nation today.